morning, everyone, and welcome to the Opening Up Access Symposium as part of the Radical Listening Week. My name is Robin Jax. I am a freelance performing artist. I work with Spectra Arts Company, and I'm also a Attitude is Everything future leader. And my co-host, please.
Hi, I'm Richard Hayhow, and I'm the director of Open Theatre Company. We, as a company, work with young people with learning disabilities and have been doing so for 35 years, so it's quite a long time.
That's a very long time.
It's worth saying also that Robin and I are co-hosts. We are not Ant and Dec, or Dick and Dom, or even Richard and Judy.
Richard and Robin.
Richard and Robin. This is new to us, and we're just trying to find our way through a live broadcast together. What you won't be aware of is that in the room are quite a lot of people who at the moment you won't see, but you'll see at various points during the day. They include our lovely BSL interpreters, Jackie and Hyacinth, people from Culture Central, Anthony, Charlene and Charlie. The Open Theatre team, we have Fiona, Grace, Liz and Erin. And panellists, including Maddie, Rachel and Selina. We have a live illustrator, Millie, in the room, who will be doing things as we go along, and we'll be referring to her at various points. And we have from Selina Thompson Limited, Toni, as well as Selina, in the room. And ultimately, but not last, we have Chris and Gemma, who are the tech team from the Steam House. So we're kind of having a bit of a party here, which is quite nice, having a good time. And of course, there's all of you.
It's everyone online, and you've been so grateful to see you log in. If you have anything to say during this broadcast, please leave your comments in the chat and it'll come back to us in some way or form. We hope you enjoy today and find this very informative and provocative.
Yes, okay. And just a couple of more things to say. This is the first time we've done this. We've tried to make the event as accessible as possible in all sorts of ways. There is the possibility of using a captioning service on YouTube, which will complement what the BSL interpreters are doing. So please use that, because there's a lot of talk going on today, and it might help with all of that. As Robin has said, please use the chat room, and that's being monitored by Charlene and Charlie, and we'll be feeding that back into the room. And we'll be going over to Millie at various points. We'll be just read what Millie's doing. She's actively listening to all the speakers and then synthesizing the information and visually representing it in real time. She's also trying to capture key ideas and themes with illustrations, symbols and keywords. Hopefully, this will improve the overall engagement and allow people to remember key takeaways.
Very grateful for Millie for being able to do all of that in the moment.
Yes, so we'll be going over to Millie at various points. Before we get going though, when this event was going to be in person a while back, we were going to do, our practice is a non-verbal physical theatre practice, so we were going to do a warm-up. And we ummed and ahed about this and thought, well no, let's just do it anyway. So we're going to put some music on, and Robin and I are going to be very silly and do a bit of a warm-up together, which you can sit and watch and laugh at, or you can join in. We won't know if you're joining in because we can't see you, but I'm hoping that everybody else in the room will also join in as much as they can, and we'll just have a bit of fun to set off. So in the comfort of your own room, wherever you are, have a go at this. Techie people, we need some music. We're ready to go. It's not happening. Stand by.
Stand by.
So basically, Robin and I are going to share the leadership as we go along in the spirit of co-hosts. So at one point you can copy me, at another point copy Robin. I'm just
Do what I'm told, still learning. To take my chances, to take my time, to keep on dancing, to walk that line, yeah. You got me shifting.
Shall we just do it without music? Okay. Slight technical hitch here, but we'll do. Just do it without music. We're ready. We'll just. Okay. Yeah. So just do some limbering up at home. Just kind of get your legs and your arms going, so you're ready. Yeah. So just do some limbering up at home. Just kind of get your legs and your arms going. Maybe the music will come in as we're going.
Can't let you go. There's no way.
Shall we sing a song?
Still burning.
Instead.
So hold me close, now baby.
Charlene's saying something to me.
Do what I'm told, still learning. To take my chances, to take my time.
Talk about social media. You can. I've got to talk about social media now. There is a lot of social media for this event. So catch up with, and this live broadcast will be available after when it's finished. It will be available. I think we're going to have to do this without. Oh, maybe a bit louder. I hope you all can hear that.
Let me wrap my arms around you, 'cause I can't go home without you. And my heart just vibe with you, babe. Wanna go sky high with you, babe. Gotta bring you close to town.
Over to Robin.
You're my lucky strike, and I got to tell you, if you didn't know, then I got to tell you, that you're my lucky strike, and I got to tell you, if you didn't know, then I got to tell you, you're my lucky strike, cooler than cold, I'm all in, so load up the dice, so heavy, the way that you roll.
Over to Robin.
I'm ready to take my chances, to take my time, to keep on dancing, to walk that line, yeah. You got me shifting, the paradigm, no longer wishing.
This will be the last bit. It'll be very silly. Okay, give yourselves a big clap. So, moving swiftly on, as they say.
How to make an entrance.
Yes. So, I'm going to hand over to Charlene, who's going to outline what the whole of the Radical Listening Week is about, which this symposium is part of.
Thanks. So this is the joys of live broadcasting, and I want to thank you all for listening and joining us online today. Today marks the start of Radical Listening Week. It's a moment that we've created at Culture Central to kind of pause, pay attention, and just kind of listen to some of the voices that often get overlooked in the sector when it comes to planning and decision making. Radical Listening Week is a call to shift how we work. To listen, to understand, to reflect and to act. And this week builds on what we've learned over the past few years through our consultations, through our work with More Than a Moment and some of our programs and some of the work that we're doing with the Inclusive Network and the Cultural Response Unit. We've learned that equity isn't just about representation, but it's also about repair, redistribution and reimagining how we do things. That's why we're launching the Charter for Equity. It's not a finished product, it's a living framework that's shaped by the voices from across the region. So we've got Black creatives, disabled artists, working class practitioners and more. And they've all told us what real change needs to look like. So you'll see some of that activity throughout the rest of the week. Lucy will be here shortly to share some of the themes that underpin this work. But as we begin, I want to say that radical listening isn't just about a series of events and activities, but also it's an opportunity for us to work collaboratively for change.
Thank you very much.
And I think we're going to hear now from Lucy. I think, Lucy, will you introduce yourself?
Darlene was going to do that. Hi, I'm Lucy Lopez, and yeah, I'll be talking a bit about the Charter for Equity research and key themes in that. So for the past 6 months, I've been working on this research for Culture Central. I'll just see if I can click through the slides. And today I'll share some headline themes which will shape the Charter moving forwards and the kind of ongoing work on that. Okay. So first of all, what is a Charter for Equity, or what could it be? Put simply, a set of principles or guidelines for equitable practice in the cultural sector. It might also be a shared resource, a toolkit, a tool for advocacy, a community of practice, a long-term accountability framework. So one of the questions I've been asking in this research is just that. What could a Charter for Equity be, and how can we make it something genuinely useful and potentially transformative? And as one survey respondent wrote, equity means centering justice and continued evolution to respond to and care for the needs of people and the environments, systems, cultures and processes that they find themselves operating within. Standing directly in front of the slide. So why do we need a Charter for Equity? Many studies cite the lack of diversity in the cultural workforce. That's not a surprise. From my own survey, 77.4% of respondents cited experiencing some form of discrimination in the sector. Within that, over 90% of respondents living with disability or chronic illness reported having experienced ableism in the sector. That's over 90%. 84% of respondents coming from a racialized identity have experienced racism in the sector, and 84% of respondents who identify as queer or LGBTQIA cited experiencing homophobia or transphobia. So those statistics are quite stark and at odds with how the sector sometimes presents itself. At the same time, we know there's a great deal of really progressive, thoughtful and good work being done, both in the West Midlands itself and across the country. So there's a disconnect somewhere between these resources being available and actually being implemented in our organisations in day-to-day working practices. And it's no coincidence that this is against the backdrop of a political moment which has recently involved both a threat to trans rights with the recent Supreme Court ruling and proposed cuts to access to work, which will hugely impact the ability of disabled people to work in the cultural sector. So as part of this research, I've gathered 85 survey responses, conducted 53 interview consultations, and held 4 group consultation sessions. I've also worked throughout with a working group that you can see on the screen here, representing a cross-section of art forms, different regional perspectives, and traditionally excluded groups within the sector. Overwhelmingly, the feedback from this consultation is that you want to see something active, toolkits with practical advice, guidance to refer to, peer support frameworks, a shared buy-in across the sector, and crucially, an investment in the time it takes to overhaul organisational structure and policy. So I'll now cover some of the key themes stemming from the Charter for Equity research. So these are grouped into finance and economics, working conditions and structures, priorities for change, and models for equitable practice. So firstly, to rates of pay. Whilst pay guides exist across the sector, they're often art form specific, and take-up is not reliable, so rates of pay vary significantly. One of the most frequent suggestions in consultation was the development of sector-wide guidance for rates of pay. This could include nuanced advice for levels of experience, different art forms, the work being delivered, as well as consideration of the budget and scale of the organisation. And Freelancers Make Theatre Work cite that 34% of freelancers reported average hourly earnings below the national living wage. For disabled freelancers, that figure was 42.4%. Invisible costs. So many interviewees cite the invisible costs which go into their work, from care labour to unpaid overtime to the additional time it takes to complete a project when your access needs are unmet. So how can we remunerate and value this invisible labour? Could we go further and treat caring responsibilities as a leadership competency, and how could this be supported? And Eleonora Belliafor writes, invisible labour is rarely named or funded. Organisations absorb the cost, often through overwork, underpayment and burnout of salaried staff. So normalising these costs would create more honest, ethical and sustainable working conditions. Next, to budgeting for equity. So with invisible labour and access costs in mind, could the sector commit to a minimum equity budget line as a percentage of annual turnover for access, travel, flexible working and caring costs? Interviewees also attest that this investment pays off. Spending money on access and equity broadens audiences, builds trust in organisations and leads to more diverse programmes. And this leads to the next point, which is advocating for sector-wide investment. So 70% of survey respondents cited strained finances, capacity and resources as the biggest barrier in implementing equitable practice. And this was even more pronounced in sector consultations, where over 90% of interviewees mentioned cost as the biggest barrier to change. And survey respondents note the need for collective strategic lobbying for investment in the sector, the potential for the Charter to aid in leveraging capital grants for making buildings accessible, as well as to advocate for and broker change across the sector, locally and nationally. So moving to working conditions and structures. One of the key themes in this work has been working conditions for the freelance workforce. We know that freelancers make up a huge percentage of our workforce. In theatre and performing arts, that's as high as 70%. So clear guidelines for working with freelancers could also benefit organisations and employers, building on some of the work already being done across the sector by specific organisations who are working best to support their freelance workforce through implementing pay scales and moving to shorter payment terms, for example. Flexible working. So the Parents in Performing Arts report recommends making flexible working a basic right for all employees to better support both parental and caring leave. And it's clear in survey responses that flexible working is about trust, giving employees the ability to, for example, work from home, attend hospital appointments, manage school pickups, or take time off when needed. This builds a trusting relationship between employer and employee. What would it look like if the sector adopted flexi-working models, job shares, and part-time roles as the starting point across roles, projects, and contracts? Training. Can we pool resources to make training more accessible and maximise sector knowledge? Shared training opportunities is one of the key aspects that research participants cited as something they would like to come from this work. So, for example, a centralised offer of training courses which organisations could send one or more of their employees to, and freelancers could also attend. And next to governance. So research participants want to see accessible, inclusive leadership, from co-leadership models to succession planning and ethical governance structures. Could we test co-leadership, shared decision-making, or rotating leadership models in small and large organisations alike? and what are the practicalities of implementing these models. There are notable examples in the region of organisations running support and training programmes for future trustees from traditionally excluded groups, developing models for succession planning, and making the reporting processes themselves more accessible for deaf and disabled trustees. So the following themes represent priorities for change stemming from this research. So the first of these priorities is expansive accessibility. Thinking about how we access art and culture, as well as making our work more accessible. This also might include thinking about cross-regional access, transport systems, for example, architecture, access to education, and support structures. One of the biggest takeaways here is the need for organisations to be trained in supporting disabled employees with accessing support through the Access to Work scheme. And there's a great deal of work already being done across the region in access. You've told me about access advocates in organisations, touch tours, relaxed screenings, captioning, audio describing and BSL, about work to restore step-free access to venues, about deep and long-term investment in supporting disabled individuals into cultural leadership, about building in rest and mental health days for employees, about working with organisational therapists and counsellors to support staff wellbeing, enhanced sick pay schemes. I could go on. There's significant and sector-leading work happening on all of this in the West Midlands. At the same time, we know it's not being implemented everywhere, and also that access, like equity, is never finished. It's lifelong work. Moving on to leadership of the most impacted, and this is a key principle from the disability justice movement. And often where we see this great work happening, it is in those organisations which are led by and embedded in the communities that they aim to speak to. So next, thinking about pathways into the sector and recruitment practices. 74% of survey respondents thought that pathways into the sector was the biggest priority in terms of fostering equity in the West Midlands culture sector. So in our podcast recording for this week's programme, researcher and producer Hazel Sealeaf highlighted that it's not just recruitment practices we need to think about, but also what happens when you're through the door. So could organisations be more transparent about how they operate in times of stress and stretched resources at the stage of recruitment? And the final priority here is a commitment to anti-racism. So with the More Than a Moment pledge in the West Midlands, this is something that we already have a framework for, which should be a key part of any sector-wide thinking about equity moving forwards. And the More Than a Moment report, the most recent report, cites a drop-off in organisations reporting in recent years. So a key priority here is sustaining a sector-wide commitment to anti-racism. And survey respondents also cite instances of Islamophobia within the culture sector, as well as a discrimination against those from migrant backgrounds, both of which should be aspects of a robust approach to anti-racism as an ongoing practice. So the final set of themes to introduce here are models for equitable practice. So in thinking about the form that a charter might take, research participants advocated for cross-art form, cross-region working groups, which would monitor and implement accountability structures, a commitment to intersectionality in how equity is measured, toolkits to share guidance and advice, equipping organisations with the information they need to be more equitable, and structures for peer support and resource sharing which allow open discussion about the process of implementing these guidelines as well as the challenges that arise in that process. So lastly, what's next? So across this week, we'll be testing some ideas from the Charter and gathering further input. Moving forwards, Culture Central will be reviewing the recommendations in this report, and this will lead to an ongoing programme of activity and potentially the writing of development of the Charter itself. Thank you.
Great.
Thank you very much, Lucy.
Yeah, I think that was really powerful, interesting stuff. My biggest takeaway is the notion of collective liberation, about us all working together to achieve the same things or similar things. I'm just going to check in with Millie to see whether she's ready to show us anything or not.
One thing that I thought was a key takeaway, that cost was the biggest barrier, and we need to invest in things like training.
Brilliant. Thank you, Millie. We'll be coming back to you soon, I hope.
Yeah, I think my takeaways from that are fairly similar. It's that need of collective liberation by making sure that there is money in the pot to make things accessible to everyone within the sector, whereas is needed. And that is also rooted in intersectionality. I think we forgot to give ourselves and our audience online particularly a visual check, as we are representing, you might be able to tell, I am a white man.
And I am a white man, yes.
And with that, sometimes we need to make space for everyone, as and when we see. And for this moment right now, we are going to be framing the day. And for this, I'll pass over to Richard.
Yeah, so this day is called Radical Listening, Opening Up Access Symposium. So I'm just going to give you a little brief overview of what we're doing here as a company, Open Theatre. Culture Central was part of a huge Arts Council funded project that lasted for 2 years to increase the range of people involved in volunteering in the arts. So this was set up in all 10 regions, and Culture Central was the key lead organisation in this region. We were approached to look at how to support the work to increase access for disabled people in the arts, and we said very clearly we would be very happy to facilitate that process, but by no means are we the experts, and that we could only do this by bringing lots of people together to share experience, and particularly people with lived expertise within that process. We were also keen as a company, because the background of our work is people with learning disabilities, to make sure that people with learning disabilities were included in the whole process. So this was a 2-year collaboration, a co-created journey of discovery with arts organisations in Birmingham, Wolverhampton and Stoke-on-Trent, with 15 access champions drawn from those organisations and a whole range of paid disabled consultants and who we could draw on for their expertise. And it was a great period of time for us and for everyone involved. We shared a lot together and we learned a lot together. And one of the unexpected outcomes was the creation of this. Yes, look at this. Opening up access. This was not an intention, but we realised that we could pull all the stuff that we discovered together into some kind of document that might be useful for other people, not just in terms of volunteering, but in terms of how to support increasing access in arts organisations. We kind of loosely called it a resource pack, but it kind of that says it's set in stone and it's that's it sort of thing. This is a printed version of an online document, and the online document is far more important than this because we can add to it as we go along. We can make it richer, fuller, we can bring more people into it. So part of the function of today is to begin to look at how we develop this resource pack into something even richer and more meaningful. And just to kind of get that point over, I don't know if the cameraman can show us the blocks. This is the, when we were, again, thinking in person, we would have, we thought of these blocks as an illustration of how we build stuff together. So already we've got some blocks with things written on them. Some of these are the principles of disability justice, which we're going to come to later. But we actually want your thoughts that you share in the chat room to become part of the building blocks and the tower that we create together. We have plenty more blocks in the room, and we will be adding to them as the day goes on. Sorry, I just said what you were going to say,
okay.
Robin.
Yeah, that is definitely part of the point, is that this is going to be built up block by block, and it is not a set of which you might recognise from your family games night. That is the distinction that we have to make very clear.
Yes, and unlike Jenga, the point of it is to keep the tower up, not to get it to fall over.
And the thing with building blocks is that if it does fall down in one point, there will be something that can build it back up again, and it'll make it stronger.
And we can do that together. That's the whole point of this. So this is a kind of physical image of the process we want to engage in, which is we're all working together to create this building block of meaning. What? A framework.
A framework.
Sorry, I'm just getting a prompt from a colleague. A framework. Yeah. Yeah, so, and this will carry on, and all the stuff that's brought in from today, we hope will be added to this online. So.
Yeah, and along with our building blocks here, we are basically deciding to lead with two very important provocations to help us come up with maybe the words, but also the deeper ideas behind not the resource pack.
Yeah.
It's not a resource pack.
Yeah. So later on, provocation number 2 is basically myself and Joanna Grace, who is on video. We are talking about people with learning disabilities in gentle provocation about a group of people who sometimes get missed out of our discussions. But before that,
we have our first provocation, and for this first provocation, we will be discussing the 10 principles of disability justice, and this one is being delivered to us, and let's see if they're in the room. Yes, in position right now.
She's there already. She was hiding.
The magic is... So, from Selina Thompson Limited, I'd like to introduce you to Toni-Dee.
Hi everyone, hello. My name is Toni-Dee. I am a black woman that stands at about 5 foot and change. I have a northern accent. I have black hair that is pulled into 2 buns on my head, and I'm wearing a checkered silk green shirt and blue jeans. I also have on lots of gold jewellery. I'm talking a little bit today about disability justice and what that framework is, and then I'm going to go through the disability justice principles. So for context, for anyone that doesn't know, disability justice is a cross disability, and by cross disability, we're talking about sensory, intellectual, mental health, psychiatric, neurodiversity, physical, mobility, learning, etc. frameworks that value access, self-determination, and an expectation of difference. That means that we are included as part of society and that we are able to be our whole selves. That all of our identities can be included in that. Disability justice includes space for self-care, the radical kind, not the bath bomb kind, although that is important. Reflection and hard discussions. So, disability justice principles. They come from a performance collective based in the United States called Sins Invalid, and they start with this. Number 1, intersectionality. Audre Lorde tells us that we do not live single-issue lives. Ableism, coupled with white supremacy and supported by capitalism, underscored by heteropatriarchy, has rendered the vast majority of the world invalid. We know that there are people who have multiple marginalisations, and we should embrace the fact that disabled people are also working class people. We are also queer people, black people. We experience the world in a myriad of ways. Disability Justice Principle 2 is an anti-capitalist politic. In an economy that sees land and humans as components for profit, we should be and are anti-capitalist by the nature of having non-conforming body minds. Disability Justice Principle 3 is a commitment to cross-movement organising. It's shifting how social justice movements understand disability and contextualise ableism. Disability justice lends itself to the politics of alliance. Number 4, recognising wholeness. People have inherent worth outside of the commodity of relationships in a capitalist society. Like, all of us are people full of history and life and knowledge. We should be able to show up to work and in society as we are, the full people that we are. Number 5 is sustainability. We have to pace ourselves. Disabled people know this all too well, individually and collectively, to be sustained long term. Our bodies guide us towards justice and liberation in the way that we try and do things differently. In the book Dreaming Disability Justice, there is a quote that people moving slowly notice things that people moving quickly do not. I think we should keep that in mind when we're thinking about how much work has to be done. The next disability justice principle is interdependence. We meet each other's needs. We meet each other's needs as we build towards that liberation, knowing that state solutions inevitably extend into further control over our bodies. We have the answers. We have the knowledge. The next disability justice principle is collective access. I think we're going to be thinking about that a lot today. As brown and black and queer-bodied disabled people, we bring flexibility and a creative nuance that go beyond an able-bodied minded normativity. We are in community with each other. We do this for each other just as much as we do this for ourselves. The final disability justice principle is collective liberation. No one should be left behind. No body, mind left behind. We can only do this together, moving together to accomplish what we need. Thank you for listening. I hope that these disability justice principles can help you contextualise the day and your work moving forward. We are going to visit Millie for a little bit to see where she's at with her drawing.
Is really useful having you go through and explain all of that, and I'm just going to try and put those into some symbols and illustrations now.
And thank you, Tony, and thank you, Millie. And we're now going to hand over to Selina, who's going to sit in the chair. Yes, I think. Brilliant. Thank you, Selina.
Hello. So I'm just going to say straight off the bat that I speak quite quickly when I get nervous. So if somebody can be like letting me know when that happens, that will help with the BSL. Okay, let's kick off. So good morning. My name is Selina Thompson and I'm an artist and writer based in Birmingham. I run a small performance NPO, Selina Thompson Limited, and have done for about 10 years now. I'm disabled. I have ME, epilepsy, a rubbish set of knees, and a bunch of mental health problems we won't go into here. But I wanted to bring them into the room because they're part of the space from which I speak. We have some pretty big words in the room today. We're listening radically, which means we need to be speaking in ways that get to the root of the matter, which are true and nuanced and complex. And this week, we're using disability justice as a prism to think about equity through, which means that we are moving beyond the rights-based models and thinking instead about an approach that is working towards collective access and collective liberation. Black feminist writer and theorist Bell Hooks tells us that the heart of justice is truth-telling. Viewed in that way, radical listening and disability justice are a match made in heaven. I would add to that disability justice also advocates for a radical practice of self-inquiry. I would invite you to ask yourself deep and painful questions this week about who is truly in your organisation, who is truly served by your organisation, and the conditions under which they meet your organisation. I also want you to try and meet the answers you find with compassion and grace. But fundamentally, this is a keynote, and I want to establish 3 things for you to bear in mind as the week goes on. 1, that disability justice can, and often does, feel like chaos and failure. 2, that because of this chaos, disability justice is not a framework for innovation or an easy set of principles to apply to your organisation. And 3, but what it is a framework of love and care that can transform your work and life in the most profound ways. And that is why we seek to do it. If you were to ask me how disability justice feels for my organisation, I would tell you that in an average month, I'm off ill for 2 weeks, that someone on the team with endometriosis isn't going to be able to work for a few days each month, that two clashing neurodivergences make a series of meetings feel more stressy than they have to, that someone is headed for an operation, which will mean that a new project will have to start on a radically different timeline. I talk about a colleague we want to connect with who is still in recovery from an operation, actually, so we can't meet up to swap notes on leading organisations as 2 disabled babes. And then I tell you about someone else who has found out that their access to work is changing, so they will no longer be able to travel to us. We will need to travel to them, which is expensive because they live in another city and one of us is too anxious to travel on public transport. I tell you that extra budget is needed to cover the person who was refused a personal independence payment but needs a support worker to be able to attend an event we're hosting. I tell you that some of us are on meds that leave us slightly sedated at all times, that others are getting used to new medications that disrupt their digestive systems or give them headaches. Someone can't get their meds at all and is experiencing a deeply disruptive withdrawal. And someone else has had a gnarly panic attack at work, which takes them out of action before a big deadline. I tell you, half the team was late for the team away day, and it genuinely wasn't their fault. I tell you that we work slowly, with me constantly comparing ourselves to others. I would also need to talk about the care work that we are doing as a team of women with families and lives outside of work, the carousel of exams, medical appointments, late night emergencies, and weekends spent with crisis teams. I talk about how the conference we went to forgot to send across any access information, and there was no lift for the one of us that walks with a stick, which meant that the next day they were too stiff to work from the office. I would say that the partner we're collaborating with didn't read our access riders, so they couldn't understand why moving deadlines overnight wouldn't work for us, and I wouldn't have even touched on working with participants, audiences, or freelancers. Afterwards, I'd probably have to lie down for a bit, to be honest. But then I would say that despite all of this, we are still loud, ebullient, and bossy. We take up space, and we want to be a leading force in anything we collaborate on. That we fight to keep working with this team of conflicting and complex needs. And that means we make choices that look confusing from the outside. That every week throws up a different challenge, and the only consistent thing is change as we pivot from situation to situation. And that pivoting, that motion, that desire to take responsibility for the access of all and to maintain the integrity of the group, that is disability justice. Writing this list was a stark reminder to me that disability justice looks, in the words of disability activist Leah Lakshmi Peepsner Samarasina, messy and wild. I'm going to say that again, messy and wild. It looks like what many mainstream abled people have been taught to think of as failure. It looks like chaos because it is trying to serve body minds as opposed to making body minds fit a pre-existing oppressive structure. And this is unwieldy, because sick and disabled body minds are deemed a failure by the dominant society we live in, and so is anything designed to serve them first and foremost. You cannot bypass that chaos, and when you invite disability justice in, you also open the door for the unpredictable. We are in Susan Sontag's Kingdom of the Sick, and things work differently here. We need new engines to move forwards. So how do we find them? One of the provocations I was given to respond to in writing this was the idea of disability justice as a framework for innovation. This is a really valid ask, and I find that often this is how funders and well-meaning institutions want to engage with disability justice and with disabled folks in general. What are the ways that you are doing things that we can learn from which will make us better? How will we be able to work with new people in a new way? How will we be able to offer things we can't offer at the moment? Could it make us more productive or efficient? Could it also improve life for able-bodied people? Innovation, the constant search for better ways of doing more things, leads itself to these kinds of questions. And maybe disability justice can do all of those things. It can open up access for a wider range of people. It can see you improve your remote working and participation offers. Or it can see you embed reasonable adjustments in deeper ways in your organisation. In some ways, it has to innovate because it is required to be so responsive and so bespoke to so many different needs from moment to moment. But the problem is that disability justice, or DJ, as I will be calling it going forward, is at its core anti-capitalist. Where capitalism's logical ending point is productivity, DJ's logical ending point is rest. They are the antithesis to one another. This comes back to the power of the call for justice and the specificity of these principles. Like I said at the top, these are big, demanding words and concepts. So, you might not like how it looks or feels, because actually disability justice is going to slow your organisation down. It has to. Our sector works on an unsustainable cycle of boom and bust, and DJ is all about sustainability. It is going to cost your organisation money. It has to. It is an anti-capitalist approach that's going to constantly buck up against the capitalist structures we are working in. It is hard, and not every organisation is going to want to do it, and those that do are going to need a stronger motivation than innovation. Luckily, I think that disability justice provides us with this motivation. Hidden away in its 10 principles is an extra 11th one, and that is the principle of love. That is the central innovation of DJ. It asks that love and care proliferate all that we do. Now, don't cringe and don't turn off the broadcast. I know that most of us are here as workers and thinking about love in the workplace. It's a source of many icks. But there is no getting around it. Disability justice is about seeing everyone you work with in their wholeness and then creating a space, an environment where they can do their work and be whole. And you don't do it to innovate. If you do it to be more productive or to be better, you are going to fail at it because disability justice is difficult, tangled, and often repetitive. Does the workplace I described at the start sound like an easy place to work with sustained rhythms and simple decision-making processes? Hell no! It sounds like a nightmare, unpredictable and unstable, coming up against deadlines in a panic and sifting through evaluations, riddled with moments of failure. But it is also an organisation and a workplace that loves the people that work there, that wants disabled people there and fights to keep them there, even when it's hard, with patience and care and a real belief in the work that it is doing. We are not always right. We fail often, and that failure is inevitable. Disability justice is a practice of bending over backwards. It is the practice of going the extra mile for little to no reward. It is a practice of real tension because different needs clash and sometimes it doesn't work. The only consistent thing about disability justice is falling short, and it is agonisingly painful to fail when you have been trying from that place of care. But in many ways, to me, the essence of equity is a simple question. Do you love, or rather, can you love those that you work with and for? And can you act on that love in transformative ways? I'm not talking about romantic or familial love necessarily, so you can relax. I'm talking about the love that Bell Hooks describes as the transformative force at the heart of every social justice movement that requires the will to extend oneself for the purpose of nurturing one's own or another's spiritual growth. I'm talking about the kind of love that Sophie Lewis calls for, where she asks that folks be immersed in care and able to move through their lives with total agency. This is the love that disability justice asks of you. It demands that the interactions that you have with people are in service to them, that they are relational rather than transactional. Disability justice is not here so you can extract more from disabled individuals with greater ease. Let me say that again. Disability justice is not here so that you can extract more from disabled individuals with greater ease. It is here so that people can be present in every facet of life as whole people, so that our approaches to transforming the sector stay rooted in the problems that are most urgent for the people that are most vulnerable, so that we centre on person and process, not on product. It is there to ensure that nobody is left behind, that we are going to be here for the long term, because we will need all of us to fix the problems of the world. It asks you to transform your spaces into places of liberation, if not all the time, then at least some of the time. But I find myself at a loss because in truth, I do not think that most workplaces, regardless of what sector they are in, want to be sites of liberation for anyone, let alone for the disabled folks that work there or use their services. They want to fit into the capitalist model and do their work. I do not think that everyone listening today can transform their workplace, and I say that without judgment. What I do think they can do is bring love into how they act, and remember that this can be one of the guiding principles of how they create equity in their workplaces. It is an act of love to ensure that someone's access needs are met with ease and without question. It is an act of love to notice when you have failed to meet someone's needs and to be open to being told how you might do better next time. It is an act of love to go above and beyond, and for that to be the responsibility of everyone involved in making a space or an event. So my ask of you today is not the overnight transformation of your workplaces, but a long-term commitment to a practice of love going hand in hand with your approach to equity. Now, I'm not sure what that looks like for you or how that works, and I don't think I need to be. I think it is the work of self-inquiry, the work of this radical listening week, and the work of our lifetimes to figure out how that manifests. But I would say, look out for the chaos that comes from trying to meet everyone's needs well. You'll usually find you're headed in the right direction if you head over there. Thanks for listening.
Thank you very much, Selina. That is a very provoking and very stirring call to disability justice. I'm joining Millie at the moment just to see what you've been able to.
Yeah, I think just that the heart is at the centre of justice, and that we will fight for that, and rather than just innovation as the central idea towards moving forward, being a good person and loving people.
I love. Sorry,
at the centre of that. Yeah.
I love that love is at the centre of that. It's a very important thing that has been often forgotten about, whether it's in our workplaces or in our wider society. And we will now head over to our panel.
Yes, am I live? I know we've been having a few technical problems. Hopefully they're being resolved as we go. I'm just going to, as you can see, the space has been magically transformed.
That's the joy of theatre, isn't it?
It is. Whilst people were speaking over there, we were frantically shifting chairs and stuff. I'm just going to say welcome to the panel. Before I do that, we're just saying, can we all slow down a little bit? It's all right. No one in particular. I'm guilty of it as much as anyone else. So I'm just going to introduce you to the people on our panel today. Firstly, we have Rachel, who works with a very large-scale MBO, mentioning no names, but it's the RSC. We have Maddie, who runs a company called Alternative Voices, and we've worked together over many years. And lastly, of course, we have Selina, who has just spoken. Robin and I are going to co-chair this and maybe say a few things as part of it. Just for the context, we have Rachel from a very large MPO, Maddie, who runs her own independent company and works in partnership with us as an organisation, and Selina has set up and is running her own small-scale organisation. So we've got a breadth of experience here, but also we're aware we're quite heavily focused on theatre. We're not just talking about theatre, but some of what we say may end up being about theatre. Sorry. So, first question for our lovely panellists. Robin's going to tell us this.
Oh, my. I guess. So, yes, first question, and this is something that is very much kind of a current thing. What have you done recently, or is there a particular initiative that you're involved in to increase access within or through the work that your organisation does?
Can we go to Maddie first?
I was just about to ask you who that is directed to.
Is that all of you? But you can start the conversation.
Okay, I'm going to describe myself for the people online before I do that. I am a white, I guess you would say I'm a woman to look at, but I describe myself as non-binary, so that means that on different days I feel like a male and on other days I feel female. Today I am so nervous I don't feel like anything, and I'm playing with Derek today. I'd also like to say that I have 17 different diagnoses, including autism, dyspraxia, and a recent diagnosis of ADHD as a 35-year-old adult. And I'm coming at this from a place of privilege. I'd like to acknowledge my privilege because I am a white middle-class person whose parents were both in working modern professions, so we had access to more resources than somebody who might not have had those titles would have had in a similar position to me. To answer the question, it's a very big question, so I'm going to try and keep it bullet pointed so that I don't talk to you until next week. But
stop you, man.
thank you. So I think a big part of leadership and co-collaboration is actually a sharing of resources, because I've had the joy of having access to resources that other people might not have. I've recently started working with the Oliver McGowan training, and through them I've learnt things about myself that I didn't know, that I've then been able to pass on to my actors and hopefully eventually members of the Open Theatre Board, because I'm also a member of the Open Theatre Board. You can't see my Open Theatre thing. But so I think being able to gather the resources and sharing them with people that don't have access to that information is a really big and important part of what we need to do, because there are some people who aren't part of our organisations that will be worrying about themselves and wondering, why am I like this, when actually there's thousands of us out there who are like this, and we want to welcome you to our sometimes crazy family, I guess it's fair to say. So, I mean, 2 weeks ago I learnt that I have something called alexithmia. Does anyone know what that word means? I didn't know what that word means. It means that you struggle to express emotions, you struggle to understand your own emotions. And so that's why I became an actor many years ago. I didn't know what happiness looked like. I didn't know what anger looked like. I did that so that I could understand that, express that, and then be able to teach it to other actors who work with me. So that's a very long-winded answer to your question, but a learning and sharing of resources.
Brilliant. Thank you,
Fantastic
Maddie.
answer.
Shall I hand over to Rachel?
Yes, so I should describe myself. I'm a white woman with, I'd like to say blonde, but it's grey hair. I'm in my 50s. I'm neurodivergent. And the same as you, I'd like to talk about my privilege as a white woman. And I came from a working class background. So thinking about the question around what we've done recently, and I was really taken by the conversations we've had at the start of this around training and how important training is to reset, re-network and rethink. And I've been on the most brilliant piece of training, and that was the Ramps on the Moon training, but around organisational change, which for me has been both professionally and personally life-changing. To think about how we restructure the world and how we rethink and reimagine what that world can look like for disabled people, and particularly around the social model of disability that I'm really ashamed to say I had no real knowledge of before. And to learn that and to think about that and to think about how, instead of saying that someone needs something, and you take the onus off that and you say, actually, we need to set up this environment in a way. We need to set up this organisation in a way. We need to set up this conversation in a way that anyone can engage in. I have found both fascinating, like I say, life-changing. And as we said, I come from a really large MPO. And so the RSC has funded 5 people last year to be on the training, and is funding people this year to be on the training, to really think about at all levels of the organisation, how are we changing people's understanding, how are we changing the conversations, how are we working and thinking in a really different way to make positive change. So that for me has been, I feel really fortunate to have done that training.
Brilliant. Thank you, Rachel. Selina.
Now on to me. I think the key thing that we're doing at the moment is trying to figure out a leadership model which doesn't centre on an individual. And it's very much a work in progress, and we're trying to find ways to talk about it publicly. But that's what we're working on at the moment. If you have a leader who is off 4 months of the year ill, or is often going to have periods of ill health, how does the company continue to function? How does that person still maintain leadership without losing the faith of your funders, and also without leaving your team in a chaos that is destructive? So that's what we're working on at the moment.
Brilliant.
Mostly we're failing a lot. So,
But as you said earlier, failure is part of the disability justice and progress model, isn't it? So.
Quite like to pick up on that as well, because I think a lot of the way we operate as a company is informed by our practice, which, for want of a better word, is an ensemble process. It's a collaborative process in which the notion of leadership within that forum shifts constantly, depending on who's doing what in the room, and we're negotiating that process. I think it's far easier to do that when you're making a piece of theatre than when you're trying to run an organisation, because the expectations of what leadership should look like impact on the way you behave so much. But also to pick up on your words about love, and we use the word joy a lot in our work, that with love and joy we can find our way through together in that process. Robin, I don't know if you want to add anything in from your experience?
I can say from being trained in the open theatre practitioner style that love and joy is definitely a big part of it. Failure is, whether as a leadership or whether in a performative sense, is definitely a part of it, and sometimes you fail more gloriously than you did before. But that's all part of the learning. I think this all kind of like ties into a question that we'll ask in a little bit as well, because a lot of the things we're talking about here, training is key at obviously the higher end of what we consider an organisation, whether it's like a foundational thing or a person who's coming into that for the first time and learning the ropes, whether it's, say, an actor or crew. Everything is connected, everyone is connected to each other. It is very important to remember that.
Thank you, Robin. I'd just also like to give a quote from a woman called Joan Littlewood, who worked at the Stratford Theatre Royal in London many, many years ago, and she said this immortal phrase which has stuck with me: if we don't get lost, we'll never find our way. And that for me epitomises that. It's not failing, it's getting lost, because we need to discover new things, and we can't do that unless we get lost. And I've just had a conversation with our board about how we have to live with uncertainty. That is the function of this company, to live with uncertainty.
Literally yesterday.
Literally yesterday, hot from a board meeting yesterday. So the next question, which we've sort of begun to touch on, is learning and transformation. Access, for me, is not about how can we get more people involved in what we're doing, how can we learn through changing the way we do things, how do we transform what we do, and therefore become, and again I hesitate to use the word inclusive, because often inclusion means, as I've said, you can come to my party if you want to. We're saying, no, it's not your party, we need a different kind of party. So how do we learn and transform what we do through working through access? Who would like to take that one up?
I think I will try and break that down. That is a very big question. It's even bigger than the last one. I think.
Wait till the third one.
Oh, blimey. So I've got a tattoo on my leg, believe it or not. I'm not going to show it to you because that's really inappropriate. But it's got a quote from Samuel Beckett, who was an Irish playwright, and it says, "Ever tried, ever failed, no matter. Try again, fail better."
Yeah.
And I think the thing is that in life we are so afraid of failure. We are taught that we should want to do everything perfectly. We are taught that we should want to be the best possible version of something. But nobody teaches you what that looks like. What on earth does the best possible version of something look like? And when you've got multiple diagnoses like I had, I mean, what really struck with me was what you said earlier about, you know, you've got somebody who's off sick and they're needing to have an operation and stuff. And you feel like you've failed because that's what you've been taught to feel. Whereas actually we need to move away from that, and we need to move away to saying, I'm doing the best I can with the resources that I have in the moment. And I think it's not, like, I'm the first to say I don't get everything right. I've got dyspraxia, I fell out the bath the other day, you know what I mean? So it's the, how do you admit that you've got something wrong, and instead of taking it personally, move on from that and do something better. I mean, the guys in Alternative Voices, they'll say to me, you're being too neurotypical, you are. You're using words that, like, you're using words that we don't get. And I have to say, gosh, I'm sorry, I'll break that down. The one time I used a literal phrase and I said there's going to be a murder if somebody forgets their script. The amount of tears that we had because people thought I was actually going to kill them, like, you know, and it's the not taking it personally, it's the being willing to adjust and change your language. It's not a attack on you, it's saying how do we move forward together for the good of and the love of the organisation and the people that you're working with. Does that, I'm rambling, does that answer anything? Like
it answers some of it, but I don't think that the important thing is that we're having a shared discussion, because no one person, as you say, has the answer. We are trying to build this together.
Yep.
So thank you for that contribution. Selina, do you want to?
Yes, but can you remind me of the question?
Yes. To move access beyond just being about including people in what already exists, we need to learn and transform things. How have you seen that happening in what you're doing? And who's been involved in that, actually? Who's been involved in that transformation? Is it within your organisation, or have you reached out to other organisations?
I think the biggest transformation that sort of trying to deepen access in our company has led to is saying no more often. Like, I think it really firmed up our boundaries and really made us look at the whole sector as a whole and kind of go, actually, there is quite a small part of this sector that is aligned with our values that we can work with without burning ourselves out, without causing harm to ourselves and the people that we work with. So I think it's made us more critical. I'm aware that I think that sounds quite negative, but not critical in a negative, aggressive way. Critical as in really looking and listening and thinking, is this right for us? What does this mean? Can we trust these people to be our allies in what we're doing? I think it really radically changed who we worked with and how. And I think it's also been transformative in my life, because I think when we first started the company, I was not disabled. That's something that's been happening, and it's meant that as I have had to adjust to that, the company has also grown and changed. And I think it's very different from what it would have been. I think it works for deeper, more profound engagement than it would have been if it had kept on at the pace that it kept on before.
So that transformation is happening internally as well as
I think so.
Externally. That's really interesting.
Can I just ask something in regards to that? So, do you think it's about being authentic to your needs and being aligned with the values as a company that can transform the work that you're doing?
I think so. I think that, like, DJ.
DJ. I love that.
It demands authenticity.
Can there be a dance move for it as well?
DJ.
Like.
I think it demands that kind of authenticity. And I think another thing which can be really beautiful when it works is that it can open up that invite for everyone that you collaborate with. And when that works, that can be really beautiful.
also just a couple of things to pick up on. You use the word, I don't want to be critical, and it sounds like criticism, but being truthful sometimes comes over as being critical, but it's the spirit in which you do it. So what I loved was when Toni read through all the 10 principles, and then you started calling them DJ, and we kind of go, oh yeah, I can connect, because we're in that space where we can be serious but also be joyful about it all. I think as a company also, over many years, we've moved from having to say yes to everybody so that we get money, we get partnerships, we get opportunities for the young people that we work with, to being to the place now where we can say no, which is a great place to be, and it's not a negative. It's no because it just won't work, or yes, but only if you and us work together in this way. So that journey from saying yes to everything because you're needy and needing to do things, to a place where you can go, actually, to create this better world, to create this more engaged world, we cannot compromise what we're doing. We have to be open, honest, not judgmental, and that's another thing I picked up from you. You don't judge people if they get things wrong. You just go, I don't think it's like that, actually. Can we talk about it? Feel. Rachel, how are you?
So I was thinking about just going back to that question around how has that learning helped transformation, and for me, for any organisation to support learning, to bring learning in, I think the really important thing is that you can see where that change has happened, and sometimes that needs to be small. It needs to be something quite small that you can work on to then, and in the context of a large MPO, to scale. But if you keep something quite small to really be able to do deep work, understand almost like a feasibility, what that is, and scope that work out so that you can embed it. So coming out of Ramps on the Moon, there was a feeling of there is so much to do for everyone. So what can we do that in the organisation we can really point to as change? What does that look like? So we took some of the budget from, I work in the Creative Learning and Engagement Department, and as part of that we have a whole schools programme, all different work, and also, taken out of theatre a little bit, Richard, we have a museum and we have an exhibition practice. So we have a welcome space in the organisation that any communities can use, and in that we developed a new exhibition, but wanted to think about how do we really embed co-creation, what does that look like? So we worked with a brilliant school, Welcome Hill School in Warwickshire, I don't know if you know about them, they are amazing, and a wonderful, one of our associate learning practitioners, Hannah Young, who also is a teacher at the school, and our brilliant young creative developer Alice, who created a project to put those young people right at the centre of leadership, to ask them what would they like to display, how would they like to do that, what should their exhibition do, but then to apply some scale to it. So as a large-scale MPO, we've got some brilliant resources. So how do we share those resources? And we've got this, and I'm going to try and describe this and do it really badly, something called photogrammetry. Very technical people in the room will know what it is. To me, it looked like an unbelievable photograph of something that can be manipulated in all sorts of ways.
Right.
So the young people that have led this project, and they were doing a piece of work at school called My Voice, and what it meant to be to have a voice in all sorts of ways. Created stories, scripts, masks, used technology to create their own exhibition. But what we were doing in the background was learning, what does it take to do this work? What conversations do we need to have? What budgets do we need to have in place? What modes and methods of working do we need to have to support that leadership? So although it physically looks like a small project in a place, in a building, actually the lessons from that have enabled us to think about, well, what don't we know, which is the really important stuff. So working with our team, we've then done a teachers' conference all around Send across Warwickshire to invite teachers in and ask them, what do you need from us as an organisation? What can we share? What can we do? And from those very frank conversations, thinking about what training we need to do with our staff, what changes we need to make with our programmes. So from that project came lots of different questions, which is really changing the way that we work and think about what we do.
Brilliant.
Can I just say thank you to you for doing that work at all? Because I think, like, what we don't speak about is how much braveness it takes to ask those questions and to start that process. And sometimes you look at that work and you think, my gosh, that's so much work. I can't do that. Who shall I delegate that to? And actually just starting the process is what's going to create the catalyst for the change that we're all pushing for. So thank you very much, Rachel.
I feel really guilty actually taking any thanks on that, because I think it's been the most joyous, interesting, challenging, difficult and wonderful work.
DJ.
Yeah, absolutely. That when you know that when you're in it, that the change is something which is really special. So I would feel guilty taking any thanks for that, but thank you.
Well, yeah, you should have thanks, I think. I just draw a couple of things out of that. One is, one of the things we found through doing the opening up access work, I'm going to use this word, it's a horrible word. Access is multifaceted. In other words, there are so many different aspects to it. You kind of sometimes get lost. What you've illustrated is how important it is to work with one particular area and go into it in depth, long term, committed, with that attitude of learning and going, how do we grow this as we go along this long journey together? Access is not simple.
No.
It's not quick fix. And there's no one size fits all. So I think that was a really interesting illustration of that long-term process that we all need to engage in if we're going to tackle
And it's
access.
definitely not a tick box sheet just saying of like how many people with X thing are in your team,
Yeah,
how many
yeah,
people
yeah.
with Y thing.
Y thing.
Well,
Have you got a Y thing?
probably I've got enough things.
Or a Z thing even. The other word, with no disrespect, pick up on is the word co-creation. I've used it, you've used it. It's a buzzword at the moment, and there's a danger sometimes in when we talk with words that we think we're doing something, but actually we're not really doing it. Co-creation can mask, actually I'm in charge. It's just a way of, so we have to be really careful, I think. Co-creation is what happens in a space with people, and it has to be there with it. It cannot be a thing we just talk about doing, and I'm not reflecting on you whatsoever. Okay, we've got one more official question, and I'm just thinking in the, oh, Charlene's disappeared. In the chat room, if anyone wants to ask a question, I think we can pick it up and send
Please
it to
do
the
ask us
panel.
questions. Yeah.
Or, and I'm going to just check in with Liz, we need to start writing more things on these blocks. So if you've got anything you want to go on a block, just say, put this on a block, please, in the chat room, and then we can start building the blocks.
Yay!
Yay.
I like building blocks.
And I'm going to hand over to Robin for the last question, official question.
The last official question, and this, if you thought the last two were long ones, with
This will outdo you.
this one
Oh,
will-
blimey.
This is the cherry on top.
Let's go.
This is, the question is, what would accessible leadership look like if it was co-created from scratch?
I'm going to need to lie down after this, aren't we? Blimey.
It's a good sofa to lie down on.
There's too many of us
So,
on it.
Rachel, or Selina?
So I'm gonna take a run at it.
Yeah.
Take a run at it. So I think that like what that immediately makes me think of is emergent strategy, which is a theory by a woman called Adrienne Marie Brown, who is looking at how rather than leadership being survival of the fittest, there's someone at the top, they lead the way and we all go behind them. Can we move like flocks of birds? Can we work together like mycelium or mushrooms in the soil? How is there a collective leadership? Because I find that so much of what we expect from leaders is kind of a bit toxic and not very fair. Like when you read that, like, I'm going to talk about theatre again, sorry, but when you read that like Rufus Norris is
going to need to take like a year off to recover from leading the national. That's mad. No job should work like that. So for me, when I try and imagine a leadership that has like disability justice at its core, that is co-created, it feels like a group of people shifting at different times, and it feels like a leadership that shifts from person to person, from expertise to expertise. And I don't think that that would necessarily be an easy thing to create or maintain, but I think it might be something sustainable, and I think it might get us somewhere different from where top-down leadership leads, which to me seems to be to burnout. So that's going to be my first at that question, because it's a massive one.
Yes, I'm just also reflecting on our board meeting yesterday, where we talked about leaders and who is a leader and what qualifies a person to be a leader. And actually, we created a list of leaders and the qualities, and then we created a list of people who lead. And I'm more comfortable with the notion of leading than of being a leader. That there are times when you can go in a space and you are leading of necessity because of the nature of what's happening in the room, but times you need to let go of leading. So the notion that you are a leader, in the same way that this resource pack is a static thing, a leader is a static thing. Being able to lead is something very different, and I think that's my sort of conversation, my contribution to what accessible leadership looks like, is accessible leading.
What I'm hearing both of you say is like it's almost like a dance ensemble,
Yes.
where you can't tell who's leading and who's following.
Yes.
That's what I'm hearing you
That
say.
is actually one of the games that we play as a company, where
Yeah.
there's people in the room, one person goes out and we say we appoint a leader, and the other person has to come back in and guess who the leader is, because it becomes so integrated that you can't work out who is leading, because we're all connected. Sorry, that was a bit of a sidetrack.
You pointed at me, I guess you're wanting me to continue.
Well, you interrupted anyway,
so-
Maddie.
The ADHD,
take it,
sorry.
Take it over.
So I guess like we also started thinking about what stops us from being leaders in things, because and for me, like what stops me from being a leader is when you've got the assumed, you know, you're disabled, so you shouldn't be a leader. You need co-support, or if you work in an organisation where there's structures like the NHS, well, you're only a band 5, you shouldn't be a leader, it's the job of a band 7, when actually we're taught that leadership should start from the bottom of the organisation right the way through to the top of it. And in the project that I want to work on at the moment that I've just applied for funding for, we're looking at what a project would look like if it was designed from beginning to end with co-creation and access in mind. And that's it's actually looking at the needs of the people that you're working with and asking them directly, rather than saying, I want to do this project, I'm doing this project for you. Okay, but have you asked the people who the project is for, how they want it to be, and what their needs are going to be from it? So we've actually called it access by design, or alternative accessibility, and we're looking at what that would look like, collaborating with 6 different theatres to look at best practice and access, I guess. So it's actually involving the people from the start that you're working with in the design of the funding application, in the outcomes. And it will never be what you've written. I've never done a project that has actually ended up being what I've described to Arts Council that it's going to be. Never.
Yes. Thanks, Maddie.
I'd like to really thank you, Selina, because you've given me something that I've needed for years, which is a way to describe my weekends. That might sound odd. I will explain. So I'm a carer. I have 2 wonderful children. One of those happens to be profoundly autistic. He's actually the very rare 1% of the world's population. So he requires 3-to-1 care 24 hours a day. So our weekends are definitely messy and wild. So often, so thank you so much for giving me that, because often on a Monday when I go into work, I work with brilliantly understanding and wonderful people who will say, how was your weekend? And you kind of go, great, but now I'm going to go messy and wild because that is where I live. So I'm thinking about leadership. So my son's called Stanley. I'm thinking about, he's someone who is totally non-verbal. He's someone who is completely vulnerable. However, and I was thinking about this weekend, about this question, what would that look like, grassroots leadership? And I suddenly thought, well, actually, Stanley has led me with an iron rod for the last 72 hours. So I think the last time I slept was Friday, if I'm being really honest. But however, what's wonderful about, and I realise how very fortunate and privileged we are to have the support and care around Stanley that we do. Not everyone has that. And we had to fight very, very hard, and not everyone has got the resources, the time, the ability to do that. So I recognise our privilege in that. But the world that Stanley lives in is, if Stanley entered this room now, oh my gosh, everything would go down. But if Stanley entered this room now, the whole room has to adapt immediately in order for him to operate and survive. So the physical nature of the room has to be a certain way. The sound, the feeling, the textures, the speed that people move at, everything has to be a certain way. So what's really interesting is, because Stanley is at a school called Sunfield School in Clent, who are amazing, and he's there Monday to Friday, comes home on a weekend, and on Friday night at 6:30, I exchange my world at the RSC for Stanley's world. So I enter a completely different world. And what's really interesting about that from a leadership perspective is that, and I think what we can take from that is that everything has had to adapt. So that social model of disability is absolute. What's really challenging about that is, and we've had this conversation many times before, because of the level of Stanley's needs, there are probably 3 places in the world that we can go to. That is it. So suddenly you watch your life totally close down. And at first, when you enter the world of care and disability, so that was something that was quite, it's quite shocking as you enter that world. But then as the time has gone on and Stanley becomes bigger and his needs are more and more, you recognise that there are so few places you can access. But actually the answer to all of them is the individual. The answer is, how do we build those worlds that individuals can thrive in? Because if you create the right environment, and if you create the right learning, and if you've got love, I think that's such an important word. I mean, often I will have people say things to me like, oh, I don't know how you do it. That really gets to me, because it is the most joyous and beautiful journey I've ever had the privilege to go on. But it's also the toughest. So how do we create places where that is something where it's just overflowing love? What does that look like? But I can't thank you enough, and everyone's going to have that every Monday. What's your weekend been like? Messy and wild, and I'll just walk off.
Brilliant. Thank you, Rachel.
Whilst we're thanking each other, sorry, I just want to add to that, because I wouldn't be in this room at all today without this man over here. And because your theatre practice is something that's so, for me to be able to travel to Amsterdam, work with a child that I've never met who cannot speak at all, and to have them come away and give me a cuddle at the end of it, like I've changed their life, that's magical. 5 years ago, I was so anxious I couldn't have come into this room, let alone be filmed live. And that's because of the open theatre practice. And that is what co-collaboration and co-leadership looks like.
Thank you.
If I may, I want to add something. My background is predominantly in live music. Theatre was something I came to a couple of years ago. For reference sake, I work for an organisation called Spectra Arts Company, who are also an NPO, not quite of the stature of Rachel's organisation, but they are an NPO nonetheless.
They are a wonderful NPO.
They are amazing.
Yeah, and the adaptions I had to make of my practice, which became very personal. As a solo performer, you get up into your own material and your performing style, which is very difficult sometimes to shake. but going in there into a collaborative environment, so of the word co-creation and its overuse, and sometimes it's not quite semantic meaning, but there was a point during the making of a hybrid show, which involved a lot of in-person filming and also broadcasting via Zoom, in which I had a moment where the process overtook me to such a point where any hang-up I had as an artist about having my work dealt with in a way that I wasn't sure was mine anymore completely went away, because I knew that in that little professional company of maybe 10 people, that I knew that they could support me with that, and I can support them where they were able to pick up somewhere else. And that was something that was really important to me in terms of an artistic practice, and it is something that can be replicated at an organisational level. It's going to take a very long time. There's a lot of unlearning that goes with that.
Unlearning is a great phrase.
Yeah, because what we have been taught is not the lessons that we should know, mostly. I always go to the Te Ao Māori word for autism. In New Zealand, Te Ao Māori language did not have a word for autism until fairly recently, and as it is coined, the meaning in English translates as in one person's own time.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Brilliant.
And I think that is something, if accessible leadership was rebuilt from scratch tomorrow, in one person's own time, is got to be one of the key definers.
Would you say that Spectra enabled you to create a space where they created an environment where you felt safe and supported it?
Yes, definitely. And that is something that they still manage to do on a regular basis. In terms of leadership, Hazel Sealeaf was mentioned earlier by Lucy. Hazel is doing work with Spectra at the moment into learning disabled leadership, what that looks like, how that can be brought from the ground up, as it were. I do realise with that as well, it brings me a point of language, because you were saying of the language that we use, the literalisms, the colloquialisms, the acronyms, everything is cushioned in language that I think comes from quite corporate environments, quite
Capitalist environments.
capitalist and hard, and sometimes we have to make them soft.
Brilliant. I think we've got a question, but just before that, I just wanted to just pick up on the lovely thing that Maddie said, but frame it within our work, and to actually raise the notion of why do we need leaders? Why do we need leadership? Why can't we be totally collaborative all the time? And we have this notion which we call the space between, which is what is it the two of us can do that neither of us can do on our own? And that's a fundamental principle. And that is what I believe happened between us, is that space between thing.
Thank you for bringing the theory back in.
Yes. But that comes from theatre practice as well. I just wanted to say that. But space between, in that space between, you don't need a leader because you're working together and creating together. Question in the chat room.
Question in the chat room and 10 minutes left. This is, what is the most joyous experience of access you've had?
What is the most joyous experience of access that you've had?
Is that supporting somebody else or
anything.
somebody supporting you?
Doesn't matter. Whatever, however you wish to frame it. Robin, did you look like you had something to say?
I'm going to have to mull this one over. I will leave this to the panel.
Okay. Rachel, are you ready? You've done yours, haven't you?
I've done mine. Yeah, I have quite a few joys. I think there's I think what's the most joyous thing is where you see someone really flourish under conditions that make things possible, and where those conditions can become embedded and can remain is that's where I feel the most joy.
say, I was actually gonna say exactly that, but I'll do it through an example. So we did a project called Blank Canvas at the Birmingham Hippodrome in 2018, and one of the, I hope he doesn't mind me mentioning him, I won't say his name because I haven't asked his permission to mention him, but it was just such a wonderful moment that I have to bring it up. Like, one of the chaps who worked with us was quite non-verbal at the point that he started working with us, and we were doing workshops and empowering the actors in the space, and we said, what is it that you love apart from acting? Because we know we all love acting. Is there something else that you want to bring to the show? And it was because I was trying to find out what their skills were as well, and this chap wanted to sing, and he sung the most beautiful rendition of Johnny Cash's Hurt that I have ever heard in my life, brought tears to many people's eyes in the audience. And he said to me, that was an experience, I'm going to need to process that. And the fact that we helped him to do that, that he felt safe to do that is amazing, really.
Life-changing.
Yeah, for him and for me. You learn from the people that you work with.
Years ago, a colleague and friend of ours called the vacuum cleaner hosted a panel talk at the vacuum. He has a real name, James Elliott. But like as an artist, he's a vacuum cleaner. He's cleaning up after capitalism. And he hosted an event, a panel talk, and I can never remember what the panel was about. It was at the Live Art Development Agency, but I've never forgotten how that space felt. It was the first time I'd ever been in a space where somebody was like, people are going to stim, they're going to tick, you can get up and move around, sit how you want to sit, like, and it was like sinking into a hot bath. I think I had just come out of like quite an intense depressive episode, and I was able to be there, and it was just heavenly. It was just there, just myself, and everyone else that was there was themselves as well. And afterwards we went to Nando's.
Excellent.
And it was just, I've never forgotten that feeling, and that's a feeling that I think I always want to work towards trying to create. And Sin's Invalid call them crip-centered liberated zones, when you're in that space and you feel you can be completely yourself, and everyone else is also being completely themselves. So that's what I'm always aiming for.
Cool. Robin, have you mulled?
I have mulled, definitely.
Mulled like mulled wine.
More than that. But it's to narrow it down to one takes a little bit of thinking. But more recently, as a Attitude is Everything future leader, we were invited down to help them set up their charter relaunch back in February. It's a big event of national importance, people coming from all over the country and putting into practice what they do in person, with a few hiccups along the way. Having your only lift in the building that's essential for entrance go down, having a lift engineer having to drive across London on very short notice to find a part, and potentially having to cancel half an hour before that. That's the stressful part. Out of my control. I can just breathe easy, but everyone else is in panic. But the fact is, that is a national organisation that's putting it together, and that's my small part in that. It's the little cog that makes the other gears go, and that's the reality of the joy of access, is that your part in it is part of something bigger. I had another incident. So I also work for a music venue in Coventry, community space called the Tin Music and Arts, CIC, and they recently had a mystery shopper. Again, being on the Attitude is Everything charter, once in a while you'll have someone come in as a venue mystery shopper, test your access. And I remembered this because the customer called me whilst I wasn't on shift at the time. I was at home on a Saturday night. I had a call to my mobile because it's in my email signature. I can't find your venue, and I don't know how to get by the description that's on the website. So I spent 15 minutes with somebody trying to find their way around the canal basin in Coventry. Richard should know how difficult this is.
Yeah.
Postcode is completely useless in a sat nav, especially since we're in a coal vault. And I had
Renovated. It's not a coal vault.
renovated coal vault. It's a very well renovated coal vault. But the principle being that someone couldn't make it to our venue because of a piece of information that was that fell short.
So you managed to help him.
So I managed to help this lady to be able to get to the area with the accessible parking. No mean feat by telephone and guess of geography in the area, but they were able to get there. It's the one thing in their mystery shopping thing that was not adequate for their experience. Everything else was, they said, was exceptional.
Right.
And for me, the joy was that that's something for me to go back and work on.
Yeah.
And I feel like many apologies were made because in that moment I had failed in that one person's experience, and they were very understanding and forgiving,
Brilliant.
which is just as well.
Cool.
But that's for me to go away, and the next time someone else's experience will not be failed because that is something I had to learn.
Brilliant. Just aware of time now, I just want to add one little thought which connects with what you were saying earlier. We do interactive, immersive performances. They're performed by our performers with learning disabilities, and they're performed to families with a child or a young person with special needs. And it's interactive in the sense that everyone is in the same space together. The performers have some kind of performance that they do. I'm getting 3 minutes now. And the people in the audience are allowed to interact with the performers. And this 7-year-old girl started getting up, and she was playing with the props, she was tugging the actors, and our performers were just getting on with it. And I happened to be standing next to the father, and he said, you know, this is the first time I've ever been able to take my daughter somewhere and feel relaxed.
That's wonderful.
Great. Okay, we're nearly out of time. Any final quick thoughts? We have literally 2.5 minutes, 2 minutes. Any final thoughts that you want to share?
I think it's just so important to keep talking to each other and
Brilliant.
for us all to share that knowledge and information that we have.
I'll speed run this because we've only got 2 minutes. I think that there's several different models of disability leadership, and we shouldn't be relying on just the one model. And I think the model that we have with creative enablers works really well because you're not telling disabled people what to think. You're supporting them, and you're saying, how can we help you be better, and how can we help you do what you need to do?
Great.
Your board meetings sound cool.
There's always pastries.
Yeah.
There's always pastries. I like the pastries.
That's my finishing thought.
You can come to our next
Yes,
one.
please.
Brilliant. Okay. Have we got time to go over to Millie, or do we? Millie, have you got anything to share with us? Have we got Millie mic'd?
Straight away, I think, lots of different things from each of you. I think the first question, having a leadership model, training, sharing of resources, and then this overall vibe of critical thinking, seeing where change happens, the ability to be able to adapt yourself, creating the right environment, and I think just in general, working together, collaborating and showing love in everything you do.
Brilliant.
That's
Thank
wonderful.
you.
So we've gone through into the end of this part of the morning. We're going to take a 10-minute comfort break, and we will come back for the second provocation.
There's a provocation. When I grow up, I want to be a cat. Maddie's book, get it, read it. And yes, we've got another hour, 12 to 1 when we come back. See you later.
Bye.
Welcome back, everybody. If you are just joining us, you are here at the Opening Up Access Symposium, and my name is Robin Jax. I am co-hosting this event with Richard Hayhow, who is going to introduce our second provocation of the day. Take it away, Richard.
So yes, this provocation is in two parts. I'm going to talk for a bit, and then we're going to watch a video that Joanna Grace has recorded for us, because she can't be here in person much as she would like to do that. I'd also like to say at the start, whatever that phrase is, that this provocation comes from the place of love and joy and building allyship that we talked about earlier. But some of the things I'm going to say are potentially quite challenging. But it's said in that spirit of love and joy and wanting for us all to work together to sort some of this stuff out. So this provocation is built around justice for people with learning disabilities. The phrase learning disabilities is incredibly cumbersome, awkward, non-descriptive of the people we work with. Sometimes it gets divided into categories like mild and moderate, severe, complex and profound to describe the range of people within this category. We never want to know what the category is, we just want to know who that particular human being is that we're working with. And we work with that entire range of young people across a huge number of special schools in the West Midlands. And we work in a long-term, sustained way with those young people. Some of the young people we work with literally were 5 years old when we started working with them, and they are now working with us as paid artists at the age of 25, 30. So we have a long-term commitment to young people. And we have what we call our non-verbal physical theatre practice, which I'll talk a little bit about later, but it is the essence of that work is that we communicate non-verbally. We believe that there is a communication we have as human beings that is beyond words, not instead of words or not a substitute or a bad version of words. It is something we are all capable as human beings of, communicating beyond words, understanding things beyond words. And we call this embodied knowledge, not cognitive knowledge. A lot of word-based knowledge is based in our heads. In cognition, we talk about felt understanding and embodied knowledge that is deep in all of our bodies. Just to put this in context as well, I've decided to frame it around 4 of the principles of disability justice: collective liberation, intersectionality, leadership of the most impacted, and interdependence, to help explain what I'm saying. So, bold statement. 85% of the young people we work with remain invisible in society for the whole of their lives. 85% of the young people we work with remain invisible in society for the whole of their lives. This is the consequence of our segregated education system. We have mainstream and special. I'm not knocking special, I'm not knocking mainstream, I'm just saying we have a system that is segregated, and therefore people with and without learning disabilities do not come together in society. So there's a lack of understanding between people because of that. I'm not just us saying this, every special school I work in, people say that, teachers say that, parents say that, carers say that. Anyone with any kind of contact with the people we talk about say exactly that. They remain invisible. The example I gave of the father who said to me his daughter was able to just be herself in the space the first time I'd been able to relax. She was accepted. That's rare. It's also possible, and this is quite provocative, that some of you will not know the range of people that I'm talking about because you went to mainstream and therefore has not encountered a person with a complex and profound learning disabilities before. For example, this is not your fault. It's a consequence of a system that we have set up in this society to segregate people. So I would argue that people with learning disabilities are the most marginalised and oppressed people in our society today, despite the fact they are everywhere. No family, no human family is exempt from having a person with a learning disability. It cuts across all races, cultures, creeds. Wherever you go, there are people with learning disabilities, and they have been treated in some ways that are still inhumane, shall we say. The world, that, as I've said, that we operate is constructed through cognitive knowledge. Most of the people we work with construct their world through embodied knowledge, and this is a fundamental difficulty for that integration, that we operate in a cognitively constructive world. This event is cognitively constructed. It's based on the ability to speak and to construct thought. Most of the people we work with would not function within this forum. That is a significant difficulty for us and for them to be included. So my argument is that if disability justice is predicated solely on the ability to use words, to have cognitive understanding, it'll never be collective. We will not be including most of the young people we work with. Intersectionality. This is, again, slightly controversial. We have this phrase, deaf, disabled and neurodivergent, and it seems to encompass everybody that could possibly be included within disability. For us, it excludes the people we're talking about, and we want to argue very strongly for the separation of learning disability from even neurodivergence. Because otherwise we are not going to understand the challenges, the unique challenges that our young people face. And they cannot be subsumed into someone else's category. And as I've said, learning disability is a very complex thing to unpick. Such a vast range of people included within that itself. And we have this thing about disability as a whole, no one size fits all. Even within learning disability, there's a huge range of what we need to create in terms of access that is different within learning disability itself. That's a challenge. So my argument again then is we need to look at learning disability from an intersectional point of view as something different but connected with those other areas of disability, but it needs its own rationale, it needs its own way of thinking, it needs its own support. It's also worth saying, we as a company do not know all the answers to this. This is a puzzle for us, and even in our opening up access resource pack, I realised that many of the young people we were working with would not be included in that access pack itself. This is where love, joy, working together, allyship, working across the territory of disability is so important, that we all come together to work out what the answers are to some of these puzzles. We've begun to talk about what leadership looks like, leadership of the most impacted, and how we develop a notion of leadership that is not modelled on the norm in order to include many more people. But I would say that pretty well every notion of leadership that we have talked about is constructed within this cognitively built world that we exist in. How do we construct a notion of leadership in which embodied knowledge that comes from everyday interactions through our bodies, which we all do, how do we construct a notion of leadership where the person you're working with will never in the month of Sunday say, I want to do this, I want to lead this, but are capable of doing that through their bodily engagement in what is going on in the room. This is a big puzzle for us, but it needs to be absolutely addressed and sorted. Some of the young people we work with, I talked earlier about the immersive performance. Some of those young people who have been with us for 20 years are now performers in their own right. They work as leaders. They are independent. They can do things on their own. But most of the young people we work with do not operate in that space. And this is where the notion of interdependence comes for us, to celebrate the space between, to celebrate the fact that we can do things together that we can't do on our own, and that we have to be willing in that radical way to really transform the way we work together in order to achieve what the young people that we work with are able to do. So if we don't grapple with the notion of the cognitively constructed world and how that in itself is excluding the people we are talking about, we will never get to this place of collective liberation. So we celebrate interdependence. Everyone in the room has something to contribute, and through that shared, collective, collaborative, co-created process, we all learn together, discover new things, and continue to work together. Everyone contributes from the space of who they are in this equitable space. And we will seek to support independence if we can, but we celebrate interdependence. So this also moves us from this notion of inclusion, which I talked about before, to not including people in what's already going on, or not shifting things a little bit so a person with a learning disability can be in the room with us, but to actually posit the notion of belonging as a replacement word for inclusion. How can we all belong together in a space? Joanna Grace, who I'm going to hand over to in a moment, talks about this at the end of her provocation. So, just to reinforce, in everything we talk about, we must consider the invisible, the most marginalised, and the most oppressed group in our society, who I believe are the people with learning disabilities. If we are interested in collective liberation, then we need to include embodied knowledge as a way of achieving this for this group of people. I'm going to hand over to Joanna Grace. In case you don't know, Joanna Grace is an international sensory engagement and inclusion specialist. She would say openly she's on the autistic spectrum. She's a doctoral researcher, a trainer, an author, a TEDx speaker, and founder of the Sensory Projects. The Sensory Project runs on the principle that with the right knowledge and a little creativity, inexpensive resources can become effective sensory tools for inclusion. The interesting word in all of that is sensory, which relates to the embodied knowledge as opposed to the cognitive knowledge that we are talking about. So Joanna Grace cannot be here, but she has created what she's called a gentle provocation around the people she works with mostly, which are people with complex and profound learning disabilities. Hopefully the video will play.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jo Grace, and I've been asked to provoke you, which is a bit of an odd request. The person who asked me was talking about equality, diversity and inclusion, and reflecting that often disabled people are left out from these conversations. So I was thinking about exclusion. It is rarely an active thing, rather it's a consequence of inaction. We exclude those we've not met, haven't thought about, haven't seen, and people with profound intellectual and multiple disabilities, profound and multiple learning disabilities, are a hidden population. They are marginalised and made vulnerable in multiple ways, and so they are people who get excluded a lot, not intentionally, just through lack of thought. And as we challenge prejudice, we do it by recognising the power we have and then using that power in action. So it's a process of do, think, and then do some more. And you're likely already on this journey because you're listening to me, and you're likely already acting. So this is less of a provocation and more of an invitation to think more. Your own thoughts will provoke you to action far quicker than mine will. I understand a little bit about the consequences of not seeing people, you know, I am, as you can see, if you have visual capacity, I am a white woman. I'm so white that they don't make foundation pale enough for me. And I grew up in a very white area of the country. My friends, my teachers, my family are all white. And I don't think of myself as prejudiced, but I'm not so naive as to think that my not thinking I'm prejudiced makes it true. Whiteness is a clear power privilege, just the same as using mouth words is a power privilege. I didn't earn or ask for this power, but unless I act to equalise its distribution, then I am culpable of the harm created by power imbalances such as these. And I do try and act. So, like, I check the events that I speak at to make sure that they won't be all white events, and I would refuse to speak on platforms that aren't platforming people from global majority backgrounds. But a few years ago, I was running a conference myself, and I only noticed when I put out the advertising material that I was running an all-white event. And that's that kind of invisibility I hadn't noticed because I have this position of power. And I ran another event and I tried to find somebody to make it a not all white event. I asked everybody I knew. I read the whole of LinkedIn from start to finish, and there wasn't anyone. And it would have been easy to say, oh, well, they don't exist. But there's another layer, isn't there? The next bit is to ask, why? Why are they not here? And what am I doing to counter their absence? My event was related to disability, and disability is certainly not reserved for the white population. So you'd expect to see the same representation of different colours at a professional level as you see at the level of experiencing disability, and they're not there. So what am I doing to ensure that they're there in future? Yeah, that question is much harder to answer, and my answers are wholly inadequate. I've put on 3 events since that first one. All of them have had better representation, but not good representation. It's not been enough. My actions are nowhere near enough. They are inadequate, and I am resting on the laurels of that particular privilege. So I understand how these exclusions happen, and I am culpable within them. And people with profound intellectual and multiple disabilities are often only at the edges of people's consideration. I've encountered offers that said they were inclusive of them, but only were really including people with severe learning disabilities or moderate learning disabilities. The profound learning disabilities is kind of not looked at. These are not people who just struggle to communicate in standardized forms or can make basic choices. We're thinking about people who do not have cognitive capacity. And it's a weird thing, because to suggest thinking about these people is itself controversial. There are people who would say that to talk about these people in itself is a wrong, is a harm, is a threat to other people. You know, and if we think about it in our work, how are these people hidden in our work? They're hidden when we don't automatically consider them as a part of our inclusive provision. They're hidden when we offer some form of standardized form communication as an access point, you know, signs, symbols, choice boards, talking mats, you know, and call it an access point without recognizing that that's an access point for some people, not all people. They're hidden when we offer an activity to take part in, but actually they only are witness to that activity. So I get to cut something out with scissors whilst you sit next to me, or I get to bake a cake whilst you sit next to me. They are hidden when we make an activity contingent on having particular sensory systems, or being able to process the information from sensory systems, or to have an expectation, or to hold a memory. They are hidden when we host our events in places without changing places toilets. They are hidden when we measure success of our work by what people learned. You know, have you got a measure for success that doesn't consider learning? They are hidden when we deem it necessary to exclude them because they cannot give informed consent. They are hidden when we remove them in order to protect them, when we only listen to proxy voices and don't try and hear directly from them, when we think of meaning existing in brains or in isolation. You know, do you recognize embodied meaning? Are you speaking to people who share meaning with people with profound intellectual and multiple disabilities? They're hidden when we talk about choice, because choice is contingent on cognitive ability. And they're hidden when we say everybody has a degree of capacity or everybody can make progress, because such insistences are a denial of their being. Like, I've been told I shouldn't talk about them, that they don't exist, or that they exist in such small numbers that they ought not to be mentioned. I've been told, and I'm sure you have too, that you should always say everyone is capable, because if in the saying of it you rescue just one capable person from the indignity of being considered incapable, and not just the indignity, from the great injustice, because obviously if you have somebody with capacity whose capacity is being denied, that's a horrific thing. But the narrative is that if you rescue just one of those people, then it was worth it. And just, you know, consider that for a second. Imagine a real life scenario, and I'll do a dramatic one just to make my point. But say you have a class of 10 people, 9 of whom have no intellectual capacity and 1 of whom does. The argument is that by persisting as if everybody has capacity, that's the right thing to do, because that rescues that one capable person. But what of the other 9 who are denied by that persistence? You know, the numbers won't be like that, but even if it is just one person who is being denied by that persistence, then surely that is an injustice too. The argument that assumption of capacity is valid is deeply, deeply prejudiced. It's saying capacity is good, lack of it is bad. It should be ignored, you know. Prejudice against intelligence is the last acceptable form of prejudice we have in our society. There are people who do not have intellectual capacity, who will never have intellectual capacity. And that's not because people like me don't believe in them or don't provide them with the right opportunities. It's not for any reason of things being done to them or not done to them. It is their being. Being somebody who lacks intellectual capacity is entirely valid. It counts as a life. It's a worthwhile life. Assuming incapacity is wrong. Assuming capacity is wrong. We all know those little sayings about assumptions. It's the assuming that's the problem. If you're assuming anything in relation to people with profound disabilities, then you're creating a space for power imbalances to thrive in. What you want instead is curiosity and acceptance. You know, I accept you as you are, however you are, and I'm curious to find out who you are. You know, how does your work convey that message? How does your work recognise these people? It's tough, because that do, think, act cycle of countering prejudice always means that your best is not enough, because you need your new best, the best that you'll think of after you've reflected this time. It's a movement, and you have to keep moving. It's never good enough. What in your offer is contingent upon some degree of intellectual capacity. I had a teacher at school who used to say, "This is not me, this is the house I live in." And he did it to save us from our teenage angst about our bodies. But if this is not me, what is me? You know, what is your definition of what your me is? And how does that apply to people with profound and multiple learning disabilities? How are you conceiving of what a person is? Is your concept of me a singular one? You know, what if identity isn't singular? What if it's shared? My research found people with profound and multiple learning disabilities experiencing shared being, not individual identity. What do you do to recognise people who lack intellectual capacity? And how do we progress this thinking together so that it's not a taboo to say that these people exist? And if I sneak in one more little, you know, and I know I'm over time, but is it inclusion we're working to, or is it belonging? A sense of belonging for all.
Dr. Joanna Grace, with a very provocative piece there, and there's a lot to take away in terms of the access that we actually give to people, and the understanding of whether that access is purely based in a cognitive place, then
yeah, I think the this thing where she goes, "This is me," was really interesting because she's talking about how we construct a notion of who we are through words. Sorry, louder. How we construct a notion of who we are through words and through intellectual capacity, but actually we are all embodied, and we are taught not to be embodied by society, by education. As we grow up, and we forget that we have the ability, and we are in our bodies the whole time. We are not a brain on a stick, to put it bluntly.
that's a takeaway from today.
Yeah,
We're not a brain on a stick.
Well, it's because I saw a brain on a stick, a head on a stick over there earlier. So we need to rearrange the furniture. Well, no, rearrange people rather than furniture a little bit. But we're also inviting you, while we do this, to just share any more reflections that you might have. We might also go over to Millie at some point in a bit. Now. We could go over to Millie now, whilst you're sharing your own reflections.
Reflections are in visual terms that,
Robin, you need to...
you know, one size fits no one, really, and you have to look at people individually with individual needs, and replacing inclusion for belonging, and again reiterating that point of being able to say this is me and recognising your own individuality.
Great. Oh, welcome back. We're over here again. As you see, we've rearranged things again. So I'd like to introduce you to Grace, who is we are all part of Open Theatre. Grace is our access advocate. Fiona works for us on a freelance basis, was actually an access champion on the Opening Up Access project. Liz works for us freelance as well on all areas of access. So between all of us, but particularly these three, are going to just talk a little bit more about this Opening Up Access pack.
Yes. So we just wanted to show you that it actually does exist. So we've all got a copy. So this is actually the physical copy that Richard was talking about. One of the reasons for bringing it all together, and we're calling it Opening Up Access, and we're sort of a bit reluctant to say a resource pack or a toolkit, because we believe it is an open-ended conversation. It's continuous. It's there are online. There's lots of live links, but it's just a way, really, of making life easier. It was intended for employers, so to make sure that the practice and organisations, when they're looking at bringing in people, anybody that actually is with additional needs of any description, just to make your venue more accessible, your practice more accessible. There's lots of different toolkits and resource packs all online, but we just wanted to bring them all together, really. We've got this thing about there's no point in reinventing the wheel, but on the other hand, the wheel can be a different shape, different size, different tyres, etc. So we just thought it might be a really good way of pulling this together to actually sort of put it down in lots of different easy sort of sections. And continuing what Open Theatre are doing, their way that they look at everything through the creating much more easy to read documents, it was decided that we'd create, so this document not only has everything together, but what we think is, because it's unique, we believe, is because it's actually written as an easy to read, in an easy to read format. And that was a very important part of putting this together, because we wanted everybody to be able to access this. There's so many different sections in it. Basically, it's, I'm reading upside down. It's the model, the different models of disability. We'll sort of base all this on the social model of disability, looking at recruitment, how to create more accessible communication, looking at budgets, reading and research, which is my favourite one. There's a bit in it that I feel like it's a bit like going into your library, sitting down. We read things for you, put them all online, because sometimes there's so much out there. We just wanted people to be able to sit and read and settle and just get to learn more of what's going on, because constantly things are changing. The language is changing, research is changing, or being more innovative, and we just wanted to be able to pull it all together. And it's my excuse to say that's why I listen to Radio 4 constantly, because a lot of it is actually from the radio, or the wireless in my day. The old days, the black and white days. And then there's a checklist for action. But the person who actually listened to us all and then helped do it is the amazing Grace. It's she's probably
No
heard that
relation to
before.
Joanna Grace.
Another Grace. So the Tonys or Graces today. Grace is the one who's. This is her design format, and I think it's just brilliant. And I'd like to hand over to Grace now to explain more about your format and everything.
Yeah. So it was through learning of the programme, I suppose. We learnt more about easy reads during the process, and that's partly why it looks this way. But as Liz mentioned, it's a document that is designed to complement things that already exist. So it features things from Unlimited, Widget, Access Able, Ewan's Guide, just to name a few. And yeah, includes some really great insights and case studies as well from people that were on the Opening Up Access programme as well. It covers a range of things, a bit of theory, communication, budgets, how to do an access audit in your venue, and is designed to be adaptable for any sector, any space, not just theatre, not just arts, and yeah, can hopefully be used and accessed by a lot of people.
We used it just the other day for a training sessions. There were a lot of, it was a dance company and wanted to work more with their dancers, but they just didn't have the time to be able to find out and do the research for themselves about the best way to do it. So we sort of took them through the different ways of communication, how to create different documents. We're great believers in who is your audience, know your audience, and creating documents specifically for your audience. There's different ways of talking to people. It's just about exactly what Richard was saying, that, you know, we're talking to so many different people in so many different ways, and we just were trying to find the right language. And there isn't the right language, but there's different ways of finding different languages to suit your audience.
And just to add that it is a live evolving document, so if you do feel like there's something that desperately needs to be in here, please do share that with us. There's details right at the end of the document about how to do that. And also if you feel that there's things that aren't right in there as well, things will change over time. So yeah, do keep us updated with that.
Fiona, you were an Access champion and brought into this process at some stage. Could you talk a little bit about your journey through the 2 years and how it's still impacting what you do?
Yes, well, as you say, Access champion. When I was first told I was going to be an Access champion, I thought, oh, crikey, that's a bit scary.
Asked to be one. Invited.
Invited to be one, yeah. I thought, that's a bit scary. I don't know that I'm equipped to be a champion of anything. But then I thought, let's retranslate that a little bit. And it's not that I'm the champion, it's that I'm trying to champion Access. And that's a really significant difference, I think, in terms of how I began to look at it. It began with some wonderful group meetings with all of us involved in Volunteering Futures, sessions led by yourselves at Open Theatre, just educating us around what Access can be, what it might mean in all its levels. And from that, I was very fortunate enough to be able to make the Volunteering Futures opportunities available to deaf communities and to those with learning disabilities. And what's really lovely, and I can tell you this now, is that one of our young people with learning disabilities that we worked with from Walsall College is still a volunteer at the Wolverhampton Art Gallery, so that's really nice. and the people at the National Trust are continuing their work around trying to work with the DDEF. What I really learned was much of the things that have already been spoken about by some of the wonderful people we've already met this morning. It's a never-ending journey. Just when you think you might have got a handle on something, you lose it again because of that things change around you. But don't be afraid to keep asking. Don't be afraid to try. Definitely don't be afraid of the word failure, or however you want to frame that, because without that you genuinely won't discover anything new. And yet just be aware, think more carefully. Don't see it as a problem, see it as a genuine challenge for everybody, and see it as an opportunity. I remember at the very beginning, somebody very frighteningly said to me about something when we were trying to make things accessible for DDEF. I don't see why we should do this, and I just counted it and just said, I don't see why we shouldn't. And I think that's the thinking that's got to be brought in a little bit more. And again, something else that's been touched on around leadership, we do kind of need to push and lead from the bottom of organisations often to make the dramatic changes. But for me, it's been an absolutely exciting adventure as well. Petrifying, but wonderful.
Could you just highlight who you worked with from the DDEF community in that work?
Yeah, I worked with an organisation called Zebra Access, stroke Zebra Uno. They are DDEF led, and in fact I am now still working with them on a new project called Making Our Mark. And the really significant thing about that was obviously they are DDEF led, so we took their advice on how we best approach what techniques best to use. And the big thing with that is very much around building trust with those communities. Unsurprisingly, there are a lot of people who just think, well, why are you doing this? Is it a tick box exercise? Do you really mean it? What do you know? What do you understand? So you have to put yourself as a fortunate, lucky, blessed, able-bodied person. I have to try and put myself a little bit into their shoes and go, you take me, you take my hand and lead.
And in that context, it's worth reinforcing that Zebra were paid to do the work, and we paid a huge variety of people with lived expertise to work with us on this. And this, for us, is fundamental to the work, that it's this, and I'm going to use that word again, allyship between all of us that will create the best opportunities by us all working together. And as I said, that was the fundamental thing behind why we agreed to be part of this, was that we would bring in those experts through lived experience. Does anyone else want to say anything else?
Well, the thing is that we are still learning. I mean, we never stop, you know.
The blocks are still
The blocks are still there. We're still building. We're still learning. We want more words. You know, eventually it'll be taller than me, which doesn't take much. But but we would like it to be. This to us is a sort of the physical manifestation of what we're trying to create. It's the words, the pulling together the framework. We've got the Principles for Justice, or DJ, love that. And we've got all the words that people are picking up today, because we actually, this is unique for us. We all haven't been in this room together, just this. And so, but from everybody being in this room together today, we've managed to start building this framework. So that's, to me, is just what this today has been all about, is about working together to create a very sustainable framework.
Great. I don't know if there's anything coming through in the chat at all, but one of the things I want to emphasise is the overall, what we call key learnings, but what we need to really, really think about when we are trying to do this. We've mentioned a couple so far. One is, if you don't have the lived expertise yourself, buy it in. Do not try and do this on your own. Buy the expertise in. Another thing we talked about with Rachel early on is focus on one thing and do it in a deep, rich, meaningful, long-term way. Don't dabble in this. Tokenism is rife in this world. Let's get away from tokenism. Let's do it for real. It will take a long time. It will take a lot of thought, planning, a lot of money, a lot of time, resources, and you will learn as you go along and be open to that learning. Don't think you know what you're doing in that sense. Have open, honest discussions. How many minutes?
One question.
Oh, okay. Shall I just finish this and we'll come to the question? So open, honest discussions about what's working, what's not working. Talk about it. Don't go, I've got it right, it's fine. Let's go, no, that didn't work. Let's change it. Let's do something else. We've talked about no one size fits all. Don't have that mentality when you approach this work. Think, I have got to think differently all the time. In this context, for this particular group of people, or even this person, access is multifaceted. It's also connected to the specific organisation, the specific location. Selina talked this morning about transport as an issue, location, the people in it. All of these things influence what's going on. And the notion that you can pull Axos like a toolkit off the shelf is not going to work. Your aim, if you're working in an organisation, is not to do it as a nice add-on, but to embed it in everybody's thinking in the organisation and in every area of their work. Two other things are worth saying. The notion that we can be totally accessible is a bit of a pipe dream. I'm not sure that any organisation can be totally accessible. And that's also because in this pack, we talk, Kelsey Acton talks about access clash, that some access things can conflict with other people's access needs. So we have to face that and be honest about that. The question.
That was the question about access clashes and what is it? What does that mean? And how do we manage it?
Okay, the clearest example, there's many examples of access clash. The clearest example that I can think of is that when Liz was working at Hippodrome, we worked together on relaxed performances, which enabled a lot of the young people we work with to come and see the pantomime. Number one, despite the incredibly good intentions behind that, it became a separate event for people. It was not an integrated event, because there will be some people who will be sitting there thinking, I don't want to be in the audience with these kind of people. But more importantly, the relaxed, open atmosphere in which there was a lot of screaming and a lot of noise and a lot of physicality was actually alienating for some of the young people we work with, and they had to go out. So in your trying to be open and relaxed and whatever about what you're doing, you actually are creating something that is not accessible for some people. And you can't move away from that. There's no answer to that. You just have to think carefully about what we do in that context. We can't, and this goes back to me, that people with learning disabilities are this huge range of people, and you can't just put them all together in a room and go, yeah, you'll all get on, won't you, just because you've got the label learning disability. You'll have a great time together. That don't work. Yes, yeah. Did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, that's exactly it. It's that, and goes back to that box ticking exercise where people will say, well, we've put on a relaxed performance, but it's, who is it for? Who is your audience again? But it comes down to money as well, because it could be, you know, you could have a quiet, you could actually advertise it as a quiet event, or you could advertise it as a relaxed or a chill. There's so many different words now as well. So it's important to actually explain exactly. You can never give away too much information. You don't take away the magic of theatre or art or any experience. What you're doing is making sure that people, when they come, they know what to expect. So the more details you can write about your event, the better. If the clash is going to be happening, you will be explaining what is going to be happening. So that, in terms, if I was running an organisation, that's exactly what I would do. I would literally explain what would happen. And even in, even in here, we have in the pack, examples of sonic stories explaining that. So looking at access clash,
Yeah,
there you
1
go.
minute.
So,
I just wanted to raise one more thing, which is this notion of totally accessible. There, when I see a venue go, we are the most accessible venue in the region, you go, what do you mean by that? Why are you saying that? What are you trying to say about your organisation? Isn't it amazing we've got all these people in the space, or is it, look at us, look at what we're doing? What is that about? So I think we have to be very careful. And also, if you're saying you're the most accessible venue, why aren't you sharing that knowledge with other people? Why are you just going, look at us? Why aren't you saying, yeah, let's work with you, we'll help you be accessible? That kind of thinking bugs me. Okay, I think we're going over to Millie for another recap.
Yeah, so I think the main things that I got is that opening up this access is basically a toolbox, and it kind of does a range of things for people that not everyone has time to do, and this can include things like communication, checklist for action, reading and research, case studies, budget, and that's ever evolving, and people can obviously put their input into what they think should be included for opening up access, and that it's adaptable for all spaces.
Thank you, Millie.
Thank you very much, Millie.
Great. So we're at the summing up stage for the morning. My biggest reflection is it's been great to be in this room and to meet people I've not met before and feel companionship, allyship, friendships, kind of commonality in what we're trying to achieve together, and that we've had some really good conversations, despite the fact that it's broadcast and not we're not everyone in the room. So a big shout out to everyone who stayed with us for 3 hours online. Hopefully you've got something from this. Please give us loads and loads of feedback. Write what you want to write in the chat. And
yes, keep bringing in the words. So we want to have this building up as in most innovative way possible. It'll be pretty interesting to see what you bring to this discussion. I have to say, for my thoughts on the morning, for the time that we've had here with the people we've had, it's been very informative, very provocative, and hopefully this here isn't just something that is something you feel that has to be taken away to an organisation. It's something that you can feel is a building block within yourself. It's a metaphorical thing, but it's a grand metaphor that I hope resounds with everyone who is here and is online. If you've been able to make it through all 3 hours, that's
amazing.
It's amazing. If you've come to us late, I'm sure there'll be ways. This is available on catch up afterwards.
This will be available on YouTube afterwards. Yeah. So yes, this carries on. This live broadcast carries on for a bit. No, the live broadcast finishes. It is finished. Finished in a moment. And we're going to have a lunch break, and then after lunch we're coming back in totally online in Zoom breakout rooms, and there is a QR code available. It will be on the screen, and you can log on to the Zoom breakout stuff that way. So a big thank you to Millie. A big thank you to our 2 BSL interpreters, Jacqueline and Hyacinth. A big thank you to Selina Thompson Limited, Tony and Selina, and to our panellists, Rachel and Maddie, in addition to Selina and to the Empfield team, and of course, to Chris and Gemma, who are working behind the scenes. You can not see them at all. And to the Open Theatre team who've helped put this day together.
Also to the producer.
That's it. Oh, and Charlene for being behind the scenes the whole time and making things run smoothly. And that, I think, is it. Yes?
So goodbye from him.
See you at
Goodbye
2:30. Goodbye from him.
Goodbye from him.
Ronnie, the two Ronnies, that's who we are.
That's a good one.
Okay.